Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Mr. Oscar Katz, representing the Amalgamated Taxi Association.
Mr. Chairman, with your permission, Mr. Bachman would like to see me. It's all right with me if it's all right.
It is perfectly all right with me. Mr. Botwinick.
Yes, sir. For the first time in my life, Mr. Truman, I appearing before a public body in the city, I prepared a written memorandum, so there be no misunderstanding, and the reason for it is that I consider this decision or recommendation that this group may make to the mayor and the city authorities as one of the most all-important things from the viewpoint of the public who come first of anything that's come before a similar body for many, many years. But before I go into my written statement, I want to direct myself to Commissioner McCabe's statement as to the position of the police commissioner and the history of it. This began under Commissioner Kennedy's regime. At that time, there was criticism about the shortage of policemen on the streets. There were less than 25,000. They couldn't fill the roles, 24,000 some odd. There was criticism of cops who were on civilian jobs in various areas, or taking the work of civilians. And Commissioner Kennedy made an attempt to get rid of all types of patrolmen who were on civilian jobs, and in the process was ready to get rid of taxi cabs as well. I had a number of sessions with Commissioner Kennedy, with whom I respected then and still respect. And this is his sole reason. I said, do you know of anybody who can supervise it better? He says, no, but we're getting criticism, and we're not going to stand for that type of criticism. Well, the fact remains that it was not transferred. The same thing took place under his successor, Commissioner Murphy. It was not transferred under Commissioner Murphy, in spite of the fact that he made statements that he had no objection if it would be transferred. The police department is a rare agency in this city. It's the only governmental agency I know, city, state, or federal, that is not an empire builder, looking to gobble up more and more functions to increase the bureaucracy and others that they control. And this is true of most governmental agencies. They're just as happy to get rid of the cabaret division. They got rid of other divisions. They're just as happy to take it away and let them stick to the strict police work. And incidentally, the same thing that happened under Commissioner Murphy happened under Commissioner Broderick. With each one of these, I've had 2- and 3-hour sessions. But the fact remains they weren't transferred. And we've also had a session with Commissioner Leary when he first came in on this subject. You heard testimony that there are only 29 men who are patrolmen who are working at the Hack Bureau, and most of them would have to do limited duty because of disabled conditions. And the others, 49 or thereabouts, or 46, are civilians. New York City taxi cabs pay $100 per year license fee. It was $10 a year until 1952. It was increased to $60 a year in 1952. In 1960, it was increased to $100 a year. And in addition, since they couldn't charge more, and the driver's license fees increased from $1 to $5, and since they couldn't charge more than it cost to run the department, and they were continuously reducing the personnel in the department, which have been emasculated, they imposed an additional $100 fee for the use of the city streets. So we're paying $200 a year per car. And $100 plus the driver's license fee is far in excess of the cost of running the department. The question, as I see, that was asked in a letter sent to me, should the Police Department Division of Licenses remain as the regulatory agency for the taxicab industry, should go right back. Why should control be taken away from an agency that by everyone's admission is doing an exemplary job without graft, without racketeering? Why should it be taken away from there and put into some other agency that may or may not do anywhere near as good a job? And I know, and anyone who's familiar with the industry knows, that complete chaos would result because it's not history. And when I get into my memorandum, I'll give you some of the facts. I have been associated in a professional and association leadership capacity in the taxicab industry for the past 40 years. I'm authorized to speak for the Metropolitan Taxicab Board of Trade, Incorporated, a trade association of New York City taxicab fleet owners that represents substantially all of the 6,800 fleet-owned taxicabs. I am also speaking as president of Taxicab Bureau INC, a trade association representing 1,600 fleet-owned taxicabs. I'm going to direct my presentation solely to the first item on your agenda, namely, should the Police Department Division of Licenses remain as a regulatory body for the taxicab industry? There isn't a single legally licensed, metered individual taxi owner or fleet owner that I know of that wants the regulation of the industry taken away from the hack bureau of the police department. The New York City taxicab industry, unlike other industries that seek a governmental laissez-faire policy, welcomes strict police regulation in the interest of the riding public. Any necessary changes in rules or regulations or trial procedures should be made under the continued control of the police department, which has and is performing an outstanding job of administration with very limited personnel. The rest of the country and many other countries throughout the world look at the New York City Hack Bureau as a model for the regulation of taxicabs. The livelihoods of about 140,000 New York City residents depend directly on taxicab industry stability. Therefore, it behooves this committee to weigh decisions very carefully before they recommend unnecessary experimentation or the moving back of the clock to the chaotic conditions that were corrected 41 years ago when a start was made to eliminate political and criminal control with the advent of police department control. The following are some of the headlines in the New York Times of February 1925 that resulted in St. Valentine's Eve raids and marked the beginning of the end of political criminal taxi rule. One headline: all taxis halted as 5,000 policemen questioned drivers. Another headline: 24 are sent to jail in taxicab cleanup. Another one: 479 drivers fined and one is sent to the workhouse for 6 months. Another one: prisoners taken in taxi roundup. Police and detectives arrest 5 drivers and hold 3 men as robber suspects. Jails 25 taxicab men. Fines 45 in cleanup. It was 5 o'clock in the afternoon on a cold and cloudy February 13th, 1925, and Friday's taxicab traffic was building up when they hit the cabs. 5,000 men, policemen from the homicide, from the vice squad, from the safe and loft squad, off-duty men, limited duty men, policemen from every detail upon which Police Commissioner Richard E. Enright could call for manpower. It was the night of the mightiest mobilization of police power that New York City had ever seen, and the object of the raid was a taxicab. Every taxicab on the city streets, every cab and every driver. Squads swarmed over the cabs at every traffic stop. Drivers were rooted out and searched for guns and knives, for bootleg booze and dope, and importantly, for some evidence that they had any right at all to be driving a cab. What was it all about? It was about official corruption and graft. It was about criminal domination of a new and unregulated industry. It was about the fact that the public, from top to bottom, was sick to death of an outlaw and unregulated taxicab industry. Not, of course, that the entire taxicab industry was an outlaw. Police estimates placed the number of outlaws at not more than 2%. Thousands of drivers were given blue stickers showing that they were honest, legitimate, working men. But the small percentage of thugs, gangsters, and assorted criminals had brought the taxicab business to the point of complete disgrace. February 13th, 1925 was probably the most important date in the life and history of the New York City taxicab business, for it marked the beginning of the end of the gangsters, the hoodlums, the procurers, the crooked politicians, and the hungry bureaucrats who ruled it. It was the beginning, although the way to success was still long, of fair and firm licensing control, which has made this the outstanding taxicab industry in the United States. It was the start of genuine police protection for honest hackmen, honest owners, and for the riding public. It was the first birth pang of the Police Hack Bureau. The 1925 revelations of graft in the Civilian License Bureau weren't exactly news. Way back in October 1921, Leonard Wallstein, counsel to a state legislative committee investigating the Bureau, had uncovered plenty. But some of the grafters he exposed in 1921 were still on the job in 1925. Drivers testified that there was a fixed scale of graft in the License Bureau. Wallstein showed that this graft income was so valuable to employees of the Bureau that they once lobbied, and successfully, to prevent the transfer of taxicab licensing to the police department. 3 governmental officials took the lead in the fight to emancipate the taxicab industry and the taxi riding public from the underworld. When I say underworld, the biggest one involved at that time, for those of you who remember and those who want to look back in history, was Larry Fay. Mayor Highland, who defied underworld threats, Chief City Magistrate William McAdoo, who was quoted as follows: "I emphasize the fact that the police should be vested with the power of issuing licenses. The outlaw taxi system will continue until we strike at the root of the evil and transfer the whole licensing business to the police where it belongs." Police Commissioner Richard E. Enright, who was quoted as follows: "Far-sighted men in the taxicab industry look forward to further betterments under police control. Like the police, they have a vision of a day when to drive a taxicab in New York will be something of a distinction." So swift and vigorous was the cleanup that Police Commissioner Enright was able to report in June 1925, quote, "We have divorced the cab industry, or that very minute portion of it, from criminality. Taxicabs have ceased to be used in collusion with burglars and bandits. Hold-up men no longer find allies among cab drivers. In fact, greatly to the credit of the cab men, there have been recent instances in which they have been active agents in helping to capture criminals." Close quote. These improved regulatory conditions have continued throughout the past 41 years. It is my considered opinion, and that of the entire taxicab